Hello everyone and welcome to CryptoRed, the channel for all the latest crypto news. Today we're going to talk about Ether and there's some excellent news for Ethereum. We'll also cover a merger between two crypto projects. I'll tell you what BlackRock thinks about the XRP ETF and the Solana ETF. We'll dive into decentralized finance and a whole lot more. Every day you get the very best of the crypto news right here. Now, as I've been telling you, both Bitcoin and Ether are at very high level. Bitcoin is at almost $120,000. We're getting close to the all-time high. Ethereum is at $4,250. This is the level we haven't seen in almost 4 years. You'd have to go back to late 2021 to see Ethereum trading here. This is really a major shift for Ethereum. There's been so much good news for Ethereum lately. I keep telling you about it, but let me give you the latest one. Bitmine, the company that keeps stacking Ether, has just bought 317,000 ETH. That's roughly $1 billion worth of ETH. And look at how much they hold. 1.2 million ETH, which is almost 1% of the entire Ethereum supply. Bitmine market cap is at $7 billion and they're holding $5 billion worth of ETH. They're moving much faster than their competitors. Sure, Sharplink Gaming also added 76,000 ETH today, but that's far below what Bitmine just did. Bitmine is clearly taking the lead. Their target is to hold 5% of the total ETH supply, and right now they're already at 1%. Of course, we are in an uptrend right now. It's euphoria for Bitcoin, Ether, and several other cryptos held by treasury companies. But we need to be careful. When the trend reverses, it could hit hard. The drop could trigger a cascade of liquidations and lead to a pretty nasty bear market. Now, back to Ethereum and DeFi. DeFi keeps growing on Ethereum. Remember, at the lowest point in this cycle around March 2023, total DeFi value on Ethereum was about $23 billion. Now, today, it's up to $90 billion. We're still not at the all-time high. Back in late 2021, DeFi on Ethereum reached over $100 billion, but we closed. Just as a reminder, TVL, total value locked, is basically the amount of money sitting inside decentralized finance protocols. It's a very important metric because it shows the level of investor confidence in the blockchain and level of utilization of the blockchain. And Ethereum is the leader in DeFi, holding over 60% of the market share. Why? Because it's one of the most resilient blockchains. Ethereum has never stopped running. People trust its security. Now, yes, critics will mention the DAO fork incident. For those who remember, there was a hack on a huge project that held a big chunk of all ETH at the time. The Ethereum community decided to roll back the blockchain to recover the stolen fund. I'm simplifying here. It's not exactly what happened, but that was very early in Ethereum's history and everyone agrees that it won't happen again. The real test now would be something like this. Imagine a massive DeFi project like Lido Finance or Eigenlayer getting hacked. How would the community react? Personally, I think there would be no fork this time to save the project. That's what I say. DeFi is extremely interesting for growing your crypto holding. In my opinion, it's one of the best opportunities to make your crypto work for you and at the same time to discover new crypto projects. There are so many projects coming into DeFi that very few people even know about. If you take the time to look into them, you can spot opportunities early. So let's move on to the merger. A merger between two tokens, two projects. This is something you don't see very often. LayerZero just announced a proposal to actually acquire Stargate, which is a project connected to LayerZero. It was created by the same team. LayerZero is basically the foundation upon which Stargate was built. Now, Stargate is the bridge that lets you swap tokens from one blockchain to another. They have their own token, STG, and LayerZero has its own token also, Zero. And now LayerZero has proposed to simply buy all the Stargate tokens. The purchase price they've set is $0.16 per token, but in reality they've pegged it to a fixed ratio compared to LayerZero token. So following this announcement, which by the way has not been approved yet by the Stargate community, meaning the Stargate DAO still needs to vote on it, the price of both tokens jumped. LayerZero gained around 20% in 24 hours, and the same happened to Stargate. From now on, you really need to look at Stargate's price in relation to LayerZero, because at the current price, Stargate still can go up to $0.2, so there's still some room for growth. Personally, I think this is the good news. It never made much sense to have two similar projects with two separate tokens from the same team. I think the only reason for it was to raise funds, and they raised tens of millions of dollars during the Stargate token sale. If I remember correctly, FTX or Alameda even managed to buy a huge chunk of Stargate tokens back then. Anyway, I think these consolidations make sense, and I hope it gets approved. For me, LayerZero's biggest competitor is Wormhole. And by the way, if you're in Europe and you want to buy these tokens, well, you can have a $45 bonus on BitVavo, which is an exchange, an European exchange. And if you deposit 500 euros, you get 20 euros. That's valid upon August 25th, which is pretty exceptional. And if you trade 100 euros, you also get 25 euros. So that's 45 euros that you can get by trading on this exchange. So don't miss it. It's a European exchange, they're MiCA compliant, and this bonus won't last for long, so get it while you can. Now, let's talk about a hack, the hack of CreditX. I already mentioned this one. It's a protocol on Solana that got hacked for $4.5 million. A few days later, they announced they recovered the funds, or at least reached an agreement with the hacker to get them back. And now, what just happened? The team behind CreditX has vanished. The Twitter account is gone. Everything's been deleted. Basically, they pulled a kind of rug pull, an exit scam. It really looks like a scam. A project that had raised a lot of money got hacked and then wiped all their accounts. It's rare to see something like this. Why pretend to have been hacked first? It's strange. Normally in a rug pull, the team disappears immediately. But here they claimed they were hacked and then they recovered their funds, and only after that did they vanish. I've never seen anything like this before in DeFi, NFTs, or anywhere else. And finally, let's go back to BlackRock, Ripple, and Solana. There's been a lot of hope since the end of the legal battle between the SEC and Ripple that now BlackRock and other big institutions might come into the ETF market with an XRP ETF. Many companies have already filled application for an XRP ETF, but BlackRock still hasn't. The block actually asked BlackRock directly if they plan to launch one. And the response from BlackRock spokesperson to the block was, right now, BlackRock has no plans to file for a Solana ETF or an XRP ETF. They're being very clear about it. At the moment, they don't intend to make those filings. And honestly, that's a bit strange because usually when BlackRock files for something, it gets approved. Pretty much every time BlackRock makes a request, it goes through. Out of about 500 filings to the SEC, only one has ever been rejected. So when we saw BlackRock file for a Bitcoin ETF, it was approved. When they made the surprise filing for an Ethereum ETF, that went through too. And now they also filed for an Ethereum staking ETF, which should almost certainly be approved as well. But here, with the XRP and Solana ETF, they're not even trying. So why would they think it's going to get... So in fact, the question is, do they think it's going to get rejected? Personally, I don't think that's the reason. Everyone seems to agree that ETFs for XRP and Solana will eventually happen. The other explanation is simply that they don't believe there is enough demand for these products, at least not enough to justify the effort. They might think the only ETF worth pursuing are for Bitcoin and Ethereum. It's a pretty strong stance. You could almost call it Bitcoin and Ethereum maximalism. To be fair, I wouldn't say they're truly maximalist. I get labeled that myself sometimes because I'm very pro Bitcoin and pro Ethereum, but I'm not a maximalist for either. What's interesting is seeing how BlackRock positioned itself here. There are a lot of possible explanations also. Coinbase, BlackRock has already said that there are limited demand for altcoin ETF, as they may not see it as their role to cover the entire altcoin ETF market. BlackRock also tends to be extremely cautious on the regulatory side, but for XRP, I personally think most of the big regulatory issues are behind us now. Another reason being mentioned is that there are so many XRP ETFs application from companies like Grayscale, 21 Shares, and others that BlackRock might feel they wouldn't get a big enough share of the market to make it worth their while. In fact, there are 7 different companies that have already filed for an XRP ETF. Some people also argue there's simply less demand for XRP products in the US and that most of the real interest is in Asia. But from what I've seen, XRP has a strong presence in Europe and in the US. My personal opinion is that BlackRock just doesn't think it would make them enough money. There's an intense race to offer the lowest fees for ETFs. And to be worth it for BlackRock at this scale, it has to attract massive volumes, like what we've seen with the Bitcoin ETF. They might not want to bother with a product that would maybe bring $1-2 billion in asset under management, because in the grand scheme of their ETF business, that's negligible in terms of revenue. What really surprises me is the absence of Solana. I've talked about XRP here, but Solana is another big one. I'm actually more surprised they didn't file for a Solana ETF. Maybe BlackRock has information we don't, or maybe it's simply that their client haven't been asking for this type of product. That could be the most straightforward explanation. And if that changes, if demand picks up and other Solana ETF or XRP ETF succeed, then BlackRock can always step in later. When they do, their BlackRock stamp alone will set them apart from the competition. Now, moving on. There is a new company planning to accumulate 1.5 billion worth of crypto. The crypto in question is World Liberty Financial, or also known as Trump's crypto. The company behind it is Alt5 Sigma in partnership with World Liberty Financial. Eric Trump is going to be on the board of this company. What they're doing is actually pretty clever in a way. It's basically like taking World Liberty Financial public. Why? Because World Liberty Financial presented and itself, the project World Liberty Financial will be contributing most of the $1.5 billion by providing World Liberty Financial tokens. It's essentially a gradual sell-off of this token in exchange for shares that can easily be traded on the market. From my point of view, this is also good news for World Liberty Financials. They're clearly trying to generate a lot of buzz around this token, which would become transferable very soon. Honestly, I think that those who invested in this project are going to come out ahead in the end. If they sell early, right at the start, I believe it's going to be multiple of the initial money they put in. And this kind of projects, or rather this kind of company, will also allow them to gradually accumulate funds to buy these World Liberty Financial tokens. Now, maybe this is a form of disguised corruption also involving Donald Trump. I don't know, it's possible. Because if there is money, that money will be used to buy World Liberty Financial tokens, and Trump will personally profit from the sale of those tokens. Next, Pendle. Pendle is a very well-known and solid decentralized finance protocol, one that's genuinely useful, and one I quite use a lot myself. They've just passed $8.3 billion in TVL, meaning the amount of crypto locked in the protocol, and more importantly, they've just launched their new platform, Boros, which is all about trading around funding rates, whether you're long or short. You know, funding rates are what you pay or receive when you're using leverage. This is something really useful for traders, and it could also be used by companies or crypto projects like Ethena to set fixed funding rates or similar mechanisms. It's great for the protocol. It's good to see them continuing to grow and launch things that aren't necessarily aimed at the general public, but rather at DeFi users who want more stable returns over time on certain kind of assets. Now, for me personally, I haven't seen yet a reason to use Boros, but for big players, I think it could be very useful. And finally, the Ethereum Foundation, and specifically the head of the Ethereum Foundation, is asking developers to focus their effort on the next update called Pusaka and to stop talking about the other update planned for Q1 or Q2 2016, Glsterdam. Essentially, he's saying, let's stop getting distracted and focus on the next update so we're not late on it before moving on to the next one. It's always interesting to see that Ethereum has so many different teams working on it, using different software implementation, Git, Nethermind, and many others. In the end, coordination is needed, and that's really the role of Ethereum Foundation, to set the broad direction, but it's the team themselves that have to coordinate with each other with help from the Ethereum Foundation. That coordination takes time, and sometimes updates get delayed, but the important thing is that they make sure there are no bugs on Ethereum that could stop the blockchain. That's why there's never been a bug that brought Ethereum to a halt, because even if one implementation fails, the others keep running. It's that diversity that gives Ethereum its robustness and make it so widely adopted, especially in decentralized finance. That's all I wanted to share with you today about the latest crypto news. I hope you enjoyed it, And if you did, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And remember, there's still 45 euro bonus for BitVavo for European users. See you soon for the next update. Bye-bye.